Macmillan Audio presents Cancerland, a medical memoir by David Scadden, M.D., with Michael D'Antonio. Read for you by Robert Fass, with an introduction read by David Scadden, M.D.
Introduction. Munt just disappeared. Mrs. Sullivan was spoken of in hushed tones before she, too, disappeared. Mrs. Mackey just slipped into the darkness of her home and never reappeared. They all moved from the living to the cancer-stricken, and my knowledge of them as a child was that cancer equaled irredeemable loss, unspoken of, incomprehensible, and deeply sad. I suspect that experience was shared broadly 50 years ago, and maybe still. But it is wrong, or at least incomplete. Cancer no longer hoods hope, no longer is a mysterious vengeance of higher powers, and slowly is becoming the thing that changes people's lives, but something they can speak of in past tense. This book is some effort to map how much has changed in the nearly 4 decades of this oncologist's experience, and why. How ideas and serendipity evolve into medical advances, at least as viewed by someone who has had a seat in the theater of change. The book came about because Michael D'Antonio and I were speaking of how much of what happens in science remains unknown to people outside of it. Science is a way of thinking about and discovering the basis for things we know through our experience. We know them, but don't know what causes them or how to change them. Science gives us a glimpse of what underlies or is the cause of what we experience by perturbing some element of the composite. By so doing, it defines what causes the composite to be what it is. That inherently gives some power to then change what is. Science, at least life science, opens the possibility of not just knowing what is, but shaping it. Moving from understanding to shaping is inefficient and made all the more so when it involves people rather than experimental models in a laboratory. The maddening slowness of medical advance cannot be willed away or engineered out of the process. There are simply too many uncertainties. Michael and I thought that by opening the door on the process of medical advance, particularly in cancer, it might bring light and hope and perhaps some inspired action to accelerate the change we also desperately need. The experience of most when encountering cancer is to step into a foreign land, Cancerland. It is populated by unknown concepts, new imperatives for daily living, and people who seem too technical and remote to be real. However, every doctor, nurse, and technician you meet will have a deep and personal experience with some form of this disease. This is often true for the receptionist who checks your name on the roster of appointments and the phlebotomist who draws your blood. In fact, on some level, we all have a personal connection to cancer because it is so common that it must be regarded as not an aberrant event, but part of the human condition. Roughly half of us will be diagnosed with cancer, and 1 in 5 Americans will die from it. Cancer is, as it has always been, such an immutable fact of life that in many families, stories of cancer are passed from generation to generation in hushed and fearful tones. Typically, the tale is told with metaphors that summon images of war. Patients are brave fighters, treatment is a battle against an enemy, and death is greeted as a defeat. Considering cancer's fearsome effects and the difficult challenge it presents to patients, caregivers, and science, the martial metaphors come easily and can be truly apt. This was especially true in the past, when cancer was so little understood that people often imagined it as an invader from some foreign place. Among the ancients, cancer was believed to be caused by, among other things, evil spirits and the influence of wicked men. This was true even in the 1950s in the leafy, comfortable, middle-class suburb of Wyckoff, New Jersey, where I grew up among some deeply religious people who felt that certain kinds of illnesses reflected badly on the sufferer. Cancer was in the...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?